Good morning, everybody. Welcome along. My name's Chris Williams. I'm from IBM. I have the joy of working in probably the most exciting part of IBM, which is Watson, where we do a lot of our AI stuff. I've been doing that since we launched Watson in Europe 6 years ago. And before that, I was a big data person, right? So this is like kind of coming home for me, coming to a conference with big data in the title. I'm going to talk today. I'm actually doing 2 sessions, so I would encourage you to come to the second one. But this first one is all about how now we can bring the power of our Watson AI onto other platforms via something called Cloud Pak for Data, which I'll tell you about. So we're going to go on a little bit of a journey. I'll tell you a little bit about what Cloud Pak for Data is and how it works on different platforms. And then we will explore some of the Watson capabilities and how you can deploy those on Cloud Pak for Data and run them on-premise, in fact, or as it says there, on other clouds. So that's what the next 30 minutes or so are all about. There we go, my click worked, fantastic. So, Cloud Pak. So, Cloud Paks are the mechanism by which we at IBM package together related pieces of software to solve business problems. So you can think of it as a set of containers. So we've taken valuable IBM software that you'll need to use in your business and containerized it and put it on top of Red Hat OpenShift. And that gives us a vehicle then to run it in a number of different ways, different clouds and also on-premise. So let's just move on and have a little look at what these Cloud Paks actually are. So in no particular order, the one we're going to focus on mostly is this one, but I'll just tell you about the others as well. So Cloud Pak for applications, giving you runtimes and developer tools for building and deploying applications. Cloud Pak for Data we're going to talk a lot about in a minute. Cloud Pak for integration, so integrating things together, doing messaging, application and data integration. Cloud Paks for automation, so automating processes, workflow, content, etc. And finally, Cloud Pak for multi-cloud management. So this is a whole suite of software that allows you to manage all of your cloud environments, on-premise, not on-premise, from one central place. So we've wrapped together the relevant software, containerized it, and made it very portable, very easy to move between different environments, and giving you lots and lots of different deployment options. But mostly we're going to talk about Cloud Pak for Data, and Cloud Pak for Data exists really to take you on your AI journey. Now this is probably going to sound like a bit of a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. The fuel for AI is data. Okay, we're at a conference all about data today, but there's this theme of AI running all the way through it. I sometimes say that when I was doing big data kind of 6, 7, 8 years ago, our focus was on bringing data together, but actually we didn't really know why we were doing it. We were bringing a lot of data together. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do with it. AI is the thing that has unlocked that. AI is the vehicle that we're using to unlock the value in that data. And as it says here, in IBM, we have quite a prescriptive approach to this, a way that we talk about the way that you should do AI, and we call it the AI ladder. And the AI ladder, in some ways, it looks very similar to things that you might have seen before. In some ways, it looks very similar to pictures that I might have drawn 10 or 15 years ago, but there are some important differences. Down the bottom, it's about collecting data. So remember, the fuel for AI is data. The first place we have to start is we need to bring data together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go and get the data and pull it all into one central place. We might want to virtualize data. We might want to be able to connect to different data sources and bring them in as we need them. And then organizing your data. So how do we, having collected this data, put some shape onto it that makes it suitable for the type of analysis that we're going to do, and ultimately for the machine learning and the AI and the data science that we're going to do? How do we create a solid foundation? How do we put governance around that? How do we make sure that we have the relevant metadata? How do we make sure that we know what we've got and that we are able to share data and information freely within the organization where it's appropriate and with the appropriate restrictions where it's not? How do we make sure we're not duplicating effort? 10 people all producing effectively the same data set. Let's collaborate together and make sure that doesn't happen. And then the next stage of the ladder says, so we've got our data together, it's organized, it's there, it's ready to go. What are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to analyze it, and we're going to understand it. And we're going to start to build models. We're going to start to build AI models that we can use within the business, ultimately, to take us to the next level, which is we're going to infuse these models into our business processes. So there's no point in doing any of this stuff down here if we can't take what we've built and operationalize it. And there's going to be a little theme of that in this session. There's another session I'm running at 12:30 over in the AI Lab Theatre, which is over the other side. We'll go into a lot more detail about some of what we mean about trust and transparency and some of the words that you see on there. But crucially, when we do all this, we've got to recognize that we live in a complex, multi-cloud, multi-vendor world. Okay? And if you look at the infrastructure of most organizations, it's kind of evolved, right? So there are applications that have been chosen because they're best of breed. They may deploy in certain types of environments. Some of them are on-premise, some of them are in different clouds, some of them are in dedicated clouds, some of them are in public clouds. How do we bring all that together? How do we bring all that data together and exist in that world? And how do we make sure we've got options for how we do all these stages of the ladder in different ways of doing deployment? And that's what Cloud Pak for Data is all about. So Cloud Pak for Data supports the AI ladder. Cloud Pak for Data was built totally with that AI ladder journey and process in mind. So let's go through this a little bit. I'm not going to go through everything that's on here because there's a lot here, but there's a few things I want to draw out to you. So if you haven't got the message already, we can run this in lots of different places, and I'll talk a bit more about how we do that as we go through. It's built on top of Red Hat OpenShift. I'm sure most of you are aware that IBM acquired Red Hat earlier this year, so we run on top of Red Hat OpenShift. That gives us a foundation that allows us to build these core services and then to do these things that are supporting the different parts of the ladder. So we'll start over here. So collecting and connecting. So this is the bottom of the ladder, this piece down here. What are we doing there? Well, certainly virtualization, the ability to connect to multiple data sources without necessarily having to move the data. Sometimes it's appropriate to do so, sometimes it isn't. So how do we support that? We're absolutely going to have databases in this environment, but one size doesn't fit all with databases anymore. Okay, people want to be able to provision different types of database for different types of application. So can we do that all within this environment? For sure, supporting some of the things like data warehouses and data marts that we all love. I've been doing in that world for more than 20 years, warehouses and data marts. Dealing with data that's streaming, dealing with data that's in motion, streaming analytics as we called it. And then the ability to distribute that using frameworks like Spark. Okay, so that's the collect and connect piece. Organizing and integrating, which is this next step up on the ladder over here. How do we do that? So we need to be able to transform data, okay, both in a very traditional kind of batch ETL way, but also in a more ad hoc kind of building data sets to service different parts of the business, different problems. We absolutely have to be able to catalog and classify things. We need to be able to generate and manage rich metadata so we know what we've got, we know what's there, we know about its provenance, we know where it came from, we know about its quality, we know whether we can trust it or not and in what context we can trust it. Business glossary, explaining what's there, what do things mean, what are the definitions, how do the definitions relate to the data assets that we have, and then building some governance around this. And one of the interesting things about how you go about doing that is what you want to do is you want to put obviously the correct controls in place, but also you don't want to restrict the way that people work. You don't want to stifle their creativity. Because one of the things that I think has changed, even in the last 5 years or so, as we've moved into a world of machine learning and AI being much more mainstream, is we want people who work with data to be creative. We want them to try out ideas, to experiment. Right? So that probably isn't words that we would have been using very much even 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. So we want to be able to put that in place with the right tooling that gives them the freedom to work in the way that they want, use the languages that they want and the tools that they want, but also have some governance and some control around that. And then finally here, and we're going to talk a bit about, particularly about some of these AI services a bit later on, but being able to do data science, being able to build dashboards and reports and exciting visual things. Okay? To make data come to life, you've got to present it in ways which are going to inform people, they're going to engage people, and they're going to want to interact with. They're going to want to come back for more. Okay? So that's what that's all about. And also my talk at 12:30, again, I'll be talking more about auto AI and the idea of starting to automate parts of the AI process. Because one of the problems up at this end is skills shortage, right? Okay, the data scientists are hard to... How many data scientists have we got in here? Any data scientists? 1 or 2, you see, okay? Maybe about 4 or 5, okay? I love data scientists, by the way. I think you're great. But we need more of you, right? And there aren't enough. So how can we automate part of the process? How can we make it so that the data scientists are focusing on the really, really hard stuff and the rest of us can do some of the other bits? And then a whole thing on trust and transparency, and as I said, I'll be talking about that more at 12:30 in more detail. But this is a massive focus. Did you see the story in the news this week about the Apple credit card in the US? And how there's a suggestion that maybe the algorithm that the bank that's providing that is using is biased in favor of men? Okay. Okay, it's a massive issue, and that's just one example, and it's going to become more and more of a topic as people wake up to this idea that we're making business decisions using machine learning and AI, and maybe we can't explain why, or maybe we're inadvertently introducing bias. So come along at 12:30, we'll talk more about that. And we'll focus a bit in a minute on some of the natural language things, because Watson's background is in natural language processing mostly. Okay, we do a lot of other stuff as well, but where we came from, some of you will remember that in 2011 we built a machine that competed on a game show called Jeopardy. That was a natural language processing challenge and a machine learning challenge and some other things, but it was mostly about understanding language, both in the context of the questions and the answers. And we've been able to take a lot of those ideas and apply them in a business context. We'll talk about that in a minute. So tools and APIs are what this is all about. So we're providing the tooling that allows you to build and model and create in this environment, and then we're providing the APIs that allow you to embed them into business processes, applications, etc., etc. And where it says about add-ons up there, that's one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, so here it is. This is the latest version 2.5. I don't think it says much on there other than what we've already said. If you haven't got the message already, you get the same functionality whether you run this on-premise, whether you run it on AWS, whether you run it on our cloud, or whether you run it on Azure or Google Cloud. So very much a focus on being open and very much a focus on giving you as many options as possible in how you want to deploy this that fits in with your own strategy and your own architecture. Okay, so yeah, we talked about this already, really, haven't we? Cloud Pak for data, sitting up here, supporting the AI ladder, and then running it in this very open environment. So we're going to shift gears a little bit now, and we're talking now specifically about some Watson capabilities. And the first thing I want to talk about is, where do you find answers in a business? Where do you find answers? Well, some of us, and those of us perhaps who have a very structured data background, the first place we might think of is you go to a database and you run a query, okay, and you get answers to questions. And that's pretty good for answering quite a lot of questions. But it ignores quite a lot of the information and knowledge that exists in your organization. The stuff in particular that's written down. Okay? Documentation. Okay? Thinking about anything that's been expressed in language. It's much harder to make sense of that and to find it when you need it. But increasingly, the way that people think about how they operate, they're thinking in a question and answer paradigm. They're thinking, I've got a business question, how do I answer it? And ideally what I want to do is I want to be able to ask that question, either through typing or maybe through speaking, and I want the system to find me the best answer. And if it's a little bit unclear what I'm asking for, I don't want it to just give me a kind of random, ambiguous answer. What I want it to do is to interact with me and guide me through to the best answer to my question. So answer a question with a question, guide me through some dialogue. Okay? And this is true in the workplace, it's true for employees, and it's particularly true as well for consumers. And so we talk about a class of applications called conversational applications, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. But and sometimes people call them chatbots, and I think that, in a sense, kind of makes them sound a bit trivial. But actually, a really well put together system that you can interact with in natural language is a very, very powerful, compelling, engaging user experience, and a really good way of interacting with the content and the data in your organization. Okay, so as it says here, okay, if you want to make sense of that unstructured language data, you're going to need some pretty good natural language processing. Now, natural language processing is a really hard problem for a machine, so you're going to need some pretty good tools so that we, kind of people who understand the business but aren't experts on AI and natural language processing, can make use of this stuff. And in particular, what you want is the subject matter experts, the people in your organization who really, really have that knowledge in their heads. You want to be able to take that knowledge from their heads and infuse it into the way that your systems understand the text that they're seeing. Because if you think about it, at one level you've got the language itself, so English or another language. The next level, you layer on industry terminology. And then around the outside of that, like the layers of an onion, you layer how language is used within your organization. There will be words, phrases, terms that are used in your organization that either mean nothing out there or mean something completely different. So you need to be able to customize and teach the system using the knowledge of the people in your organization how to find these answers. I'll give you a quick example of a oil exploration company called Woodside down in Australia. They are using Watson Discovery, which we're going to talk about in a second, which to capture the knowledge of the more mature engineers that they have working on all their installations, so that as they retire, that knowledge is available in this Q&A, question answering kind of way to the younger people. So how do we do it? Well, we take documents and we ingest them into this thing called Watson Discovery, and it allows us to answer questions about them. Okay. And there's kind of two sides to this, as it says here. On the one hand, do we just want to retrieve a document? Well, sometimes yes. But actually, what we also want to be able to do is to extract a bit more meaning than that, right? To home in on the pieces of the document that maybe give us a very specific answer to our question. So this is a bit different to a kind of keyword search type world. We're understanding the question and we're retrieving specific answers related to it. So yeah, we're really good at this stuff, right? So quickly you can get to good results by ingesting your documents. Domain adaptation, the ability to infuse your own terminology and your own knowledge into the system so that it's using a model of the world that relates to your business, not just a general purpose, general knowledge model. And yeah, that's saying pretty much the same stuff, right? Finding connections between things. So the other piece of the jigsaw, so that's discovery. That's about going and finding answers in big collections of knowledge, corpuses as we call them, of documents. The other piece of the equation is this thing called Watson Assistant. And Watson Assistant is the thing that controls that dialogue that I was talking about, that interaction. the ability for you to chat with a machine in the same way as you would with a person. Asking questions, being guided through a process, clarification, collecting information, collecting context, and then using that to take you through to a great outcome as a consumer and or as an employee. And this is kind of how it works, right? There's a customer over here. They're coming in through various channels. These can be speech channels or text-based channels. We have this thing called an assistant, and its job is to use what we call skills to provide answers to questions. And there are, broadly speaking, 3 types of skills, right? Number 1 is what we call a dialogue skill. That's a very interactive skill, so that will guide you through a process. There's a search type skill, which we've already talked about, using discovery, going and finding an answer in a set of documents. And finally, there's always the option of falling back to a person. What if the machine can't answer the question? Or what if it's inappropriate for a machine to answer the question? I do a lot of work in the banks. RBS and NatWest are a huge customer of Watson Assistant here in the UK. And they have, for example, a very simple rule that says if somebody goes to their assistant, one of their customers, and starts talking about a bereavement, they're instantly transferred to a person, because that's not something you want to be dealt with a machine. Okay, you might also do that if the machine has failed to understand. Okay, so there's lots of different ways we can deploy this. Customer self-service is one of the obvious ones. So I've already talked about RBS and NatWest doing that. Vodafone do it as well. Lots of other examples. Watson Assistant for customer self-service. But also Watson Assistant for employee self-service. So RBS Group, as well as having Cora, which is their customer-facing conversational system, they also have a conversational system that's used internally to answer HR questions called Archie. And totally, I was doing a talk like this earlier this year, and totally unprompted, somebody came up to me after one of the talks and said, "I work for RBS and I love Archie," she said. So it must work. Okay, and Agent Assist. So if we're going to have this knowledge available in a system that can answer questions, let's not just make it available to customers, let's make it available to agents as well, to help them to answer questions better, to get them trained more quickly, and to make their role more fulfilling and interesting. So that's a sort of a whistle-stop tour of just some of the capabilities of Watson. And the key thing is that you can take those capabilities and you can plug them in as add-ons into that Cloud Pak for data. So Watson is now as portable as all the things I was talking about earlier. So you can take those Watson natural language processing services and you can run them on-premise, and you can run them, crucially, on other clouds. Okay. There's some other bits as well that you can run as add-ons on Cloud Pak for data. There's something called the Watson API Kit, and the Watson API Kit adds in some extra capabilities. So natural language understanding, think of that as a kind of Swiss Army knife. You give it a piece of text or a document, and it tells you loads of things about that document, which you can then use to analyze it and to work out what's really going on. Knowledge Studio is the thing that we use to do that domain adaptation I was talking about, to teach the system how to understand how language is used, and crucially, speech to text, text to speech. So speech technology has matured massively in the last couple of years, to the point where we're now able to deploy voice-based assistants that work as well as text-based assistants. And as well as these two things here, which do the obvious translation backwards and forwards, also we have connectivity to telephony platforms. So you can make this answer your phone in your contact center. People can ask for what they want, and in many cases do self-service that way. Okay, so that's another really interesting way of interacting with this stuff and supporting more and more channels. Okay, so think about that as a contrast to that kind of IVR experience that we're all used to. You know, press 1 if you want this, press 2 if you want something else. Whereas you can just phone up, you get straight through, you say what you want, and in many cases that transaction or that inquiry can be handled in a self-service way, in exactly the same way as if you were typing to a chatbot. Very, very powerful. So we talked about some of these already, but here's your stack, right? Down at the bottom here, we've got on-premise and all these clouds. Then we've got OpenShift. Then we've got Cloud Pak for Data, which is providing a minimum in a Watson context, providing just the sort of login and the logging and all the other things that we need to do just to manage the environment in a consistent way. But over the top of that, we can layer these things. So we talked about assistant and discovery. We can also bring in Cognos Analytics for doing dashboarding and data visualization and all of the cool things that that does. We can do planning analytics for budgeting, forecasting, etc. And some very specific things that we have around regulatory environments for anti-money laundering and some of the other things that it says on there. And all of this can be deployed into this environment. So it becomes a container which you can use and mix and match all the different pieces that you need. So it may well be that, and I'm working with a client at the moment who's deploying Cloud Pak for Data, and they're using a bit of Assistant, a bit of Discovery, and they're also doing some other kind of more pure data science stuff to build some models underneath to support some of what they're doing. So a lot of flexibility there in how this works. So if you haven't got the message, I'm going to repeat it now. Okay. Watson runs on the main public clouds now, okay, as does a lot of other Watson capability. We do it through this vehicle of something called Cloud Pak for Data, which gives you an enormous range of possibilities of how you interact with your data and how you manage your data. It's all built on Red Hat OpenShift, and if you want to find out more about it, our stand is literally there. And there are a team of very smart people who will be able to guide you through and talk you through different steps of the AI ladder, how it all fits together, and how it might be relevant for your organizations. So thank you very much. I've probably got time for one question, I suspect. Okay, anyone want to do as a gentleman here? Yes? Okay, so the question is, how many languages are supported in text-to-speech, speech-to-text? The answer is, I can't remember the exact number, but I'll tell you that it's most Western European languages, plus Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and one that I've probably forgotten. But it's the kind of those kind of languages. We prioritize based. I can't remember if Arabic is supported in speech-to-text. It's supported in most of our natural language processing, but I'll find out for you. If you come to the stand, we'll find that out for you. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Do you want to do one more question before I head off? One more question. This lady here. Fantastic. Yeah. That's a great question, actually. So the question was, we all understand the idea that if I ask a vague question, I should be disambiguated, as we like to call it, right, and led through to a sensible answer. But if I ask a question that maybe is too specific and there's maybe some supporting information that would help me to better understand, or I've asked a question that's a little bit too targeted, can the system help me with that? And the answer is yes, right? And it depends on how you design your interactions and how you use what we call context, which is one of the very important pieces of understanding of how this works. So come to the stand and we can talk about that in more detail, but it's a really interesting question. So yeah, so the short answer is yes, but, right? So that, as with ever with these things. So thank you very much for listening. Do come to the AI Lab Theatre at 12:30 if you want to know more about trust and transparency, eliminating bias, all of those things. It's going to be a really good session, I hope. So thank you for listening.